And last year we had with us Catherine Hayhoe, an atmospheric scientist and an evangelical Christian, associate professor in the Department of Political Science and the director of the Climate Science Center at Texas Tech University. And now this year we have Winona LaDuke. So before I turn over the introduction of this evening's speaker, I want to say just a little bit about Judith Moyers. She always gets embarrassed when this part comes. She said to me yesterday, just tell everybody that the most important thing I've done in the last 2 years is retire. But we all know much about Judith. The list of her accomplishments is long. She was president of Public Affairs Television for 14 years, and she retired as the company's CEO in 2015. While she was there, she was the executive producer of such major documentaries as Earth on Edge, Trade Secrets, On Our Own Terms, Amazing Grace, The Arab World, Genesis, All of Our Children, and Free Speech for Sale. She is a member of the American Academy of Television Arts and Sciences and has been awarded several Emmys, the DuPont Award, 2 Peabodys, the Christopher Award. In fact, she's named so many awards we can't get them on a page here. And she has, through her time in New York, served on a number of boards, including unions. She was also a trustee of the State University of New York and vice chair for 13 years. How the woman has time to do all of this, I don't know. She served as U.S. Commissioner to UNESCO on the White House Commission on Children, was a member of the National Governors Association Task Force on Education and Economic Development. She was born in Dallas, went to the University of Texas, and has journeyed to this place with her partner, Bill Moyers, and we're very happy this evening, I should also say, to have their daughter, Suzanne, with us as well. I can think of no better person whose commitment and whose warmth and friendliness and sense of relationship and connection to those who are doing good in the world. It sits at the heart of who Judith is. I can think of no better person to put the name Woman of Spirit next to than Judith Moyers. So Judith, thank you.
I thought when I turned 80 I ought to retire. Thanks to all of you for coming tonight. Bill endowed this lecture series as a gift to me on my 75th birthday, and it's the best gift ever because I have the delight of choosing each year's Woman of Spirit. This is a difficult choice because there's so many of them. Women all over the world are leading the way. Did you notice that? Did you notice that any time a city or a state or a hospital or a university gets in real trouble, they always elect a woman? But we missed this last time. But we need leadership in showing us the way. And there's activism and there's activism. If you look at these women who've been here before in the last 6 years, you see they're all different ways of leading, and they're all different ways of being an activist. Lema Bowie, who came first and has been in residence here recently, I don't know if she's still here, she led the market women of Liberia to rise up against the murderous President Charles Taylor. And they tried various strategies. And finally, they sat down, and this was hundreds of women from the marketplace. And when he wouldn't receive them, he wouldn't talk to them, they said then they believed that they would just take off their clothes. And Lema said to us, you know, that's the worst thing in the world that could happen to a Liberian man is to see his mother naked. And so they did begin to undress, sitting in front of the palace. And he came around. And he's gone. And they elected a woman as the president. But we found that these women all over the world, many of whom are unrecognized, that they often stand on a spiritual base because something has to keep them going, you know. They have to have some kind of inner core that's stronger than the usual physical person. Winona LaDuke is another one of those women. And she is a woman of spirit. She comes to us from the front lines of the battle for environmental justice. A rural development economist working on issues of indigenous economics, food, and energy policy, she lives and works on her reservation, the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota. She calls herself, I heard you say this online, I hope it's true. She calls her mother to, is it 7 children? Or you said 7 children call you mother. Now, I haven't investigated that to see just exactly how that is, but I believe it. And I also think it's an important part of any woman's biography. She is a leader on issues of climate change, renewable energy, and environmental justice, working within and alongside indigenous communities. A graduate of Harvard and Antioch universities, she's recognized internationally by so many organizations and has been awarded so many honors, as you see in your program, that I'm going to skip over those and let you read them. But to bring you up to the present in her fight against pipeline development, taking on powerful companies like ExxonMobil and Enbridge. Last year, she had a major victory in forcing the Enbridge Corporation to abandon their plans for the Sandpiper project, a new pipeline that would carry Bakken crude through the pristine wild rice beds of northern Minnesota. Enbridge left Minnesota because of all the legal, citizen, and spiritual actions taken by Winona and her group. In her most recent book, The Winona LaDuke Chronicles, she writes, I have lived much of my life on the road. Like my mother and father before me, I travel. For me, it is from one tribal nation to another, from university to regulatory hearing to courtroom to the United Nations, and then home. It is by car, airplane, and sometimes by horse or canoe. I hope you get to see one of the documentaries. There have been several made about Winona. The one that I've seen is by filmmaker Carrie Pickett. And you see her leading a band of people on horses, riding against a corporation. By the way, the Huffington Post has called that book, they say that it reads like a prayer. And there are some books here that in the reception tonight you'll be able to have a chance to see. Winona spent much of last winter living and standing at Standing Rock in protest to the XL pipeline, which threatens a major water supply and invades a sacred site. One of my favorite photographs shows Winona confronting an enormous red ExxonMobil heavy haul truck, just standing there in the middle of the road in front of it. It reminded me of that 1989 picture. You remember that one man standing in front of the huge tank in Donovan Square? That. We are reminded that the resistance to oppressive power begins with a single woman or man calling forth courage from the deepest wellsprings of the soul. Winona, welcome to Union.
Thank you, Judith. You're very gracious. Anin and Dinaway Magaraduk, Nikagoy Tamagas, Bine Sikwe to go, Makwando Deum, Gababani Kag, Ishkanaganing and Dunjabamigwich. Thank you very much for the honor of being here with you today. I've had a lovely day. Thank you to all who have come. All have come from the indigenous community, the Tadadaho as well. Thank you for the many people here who have been gracious to me all day. I have to say I have not been at a desk with secretarial support for years. I felt like I had arrived. So I cannot thank you enough. I got so much writing done and work done today. So, as I thought about what I was going to talk with you all about today, I want to talk about, I called it Windigo economics and the protection of the sacred. I want to talk about this moment of time where we are and our spiritual covenant and our opportunity to do the right thing. I want to talk about the idea that we want to be the ancestors that our descendants are proud of. And I want to talk about that moment as ours. So having said that, what I want to say is Anin and Dinaway Maganatuk, which is hello, my relatives. That is what that means in our language, but in my language and in my cultural framework, our relatives have wings and fins and roots and paws as well as hands. We are all related. That's our teaching. And that's what I know from the community from which I come. This is a painting from our territory. An artist, his name is Roy Thomas. He's deceased, but this is We Are All in the Same Boat, which is basically the same idea. Is that right? And this is some art from my community. I always like to bring this art, also Roy Thomas, an acrylic painting. But what I want to say is that this is art that comes from the spiritual teachings of Anishinaabe people. It is reflected in our pictographs and in our Madewan scrolls. It has been adapted over the years to become art that now appears in an acrylic painting. But when I was an undergraduate at Harvard University, if you wanted to study the art from Europe, you went to the Fine Arts Department. And if you wanted to study the art from indigenous peoples, you went to anthropology. And that is still the case by and large today. And so what I want to say is that it is possible that the paradigm which got us into the tangle we are in today may not be the paradigm that will get us out of it. And now would be a time that we need to kind of liberate our minds in the words of Bob Marley and try to let a few things go. So I want to talk about that. And I want to say that this month in our language, this month is Iskigami Zigigizis, which is the maple syruping moon. We are at the end of the time of maple syruping, Iskigami Zigigizis. The month that follows, I see it is already here, Wabaganagizis. That's the flower moon. Then we have Odaminagizis, the strawberry moon, Mean-gizis, the blueberry moon, Manominake-gizis, the wild rice-making moon, because in my territory, that is the food that grows upon the water, our sacred and most spiritual food. Then we have Watibaga-gizis around September, when the leaves change color, right? Then we have Banakweo-gizis, they fall, Gashkadano-gizis, the freezing over moon around November, Manadu-gizis moons, Gishi-Manadu-gizis, the great spirit moon, Onabana-gizis, hard-crusted snow moon. Those are some of the moons in my language. That is a language that also is a traditional language that would be spoken here because I am in fact related to the people that come from this territory. In our migration story as Anishinaabe people, we were instructed many, many, many years ago by our prophets, because we too have prophets. And in that we were instructed to follow a shell which appeared in the sky. And in that migration, which took several hundred years, we are told, our people made 7 resting spots until we came to the place we were told and instructed to go to. That is the place where the food grows upon the water. That is the Great Lakes region, the only place in the world where wild rice, or our most sacred monomen, grows. So that's where I come from. But I want to say that in those words, I thought you might like to hear a little of our language. But I also thought that maybe, did you notice that none of those moons, the moons of the Anishinaabe calendar, that none of those moons is named after a Roman emperor? Did y'all get that? I just want to let you know it is possible to have an entire worldview that has nothing to do with empire. You'll be okay. Just let that one go, okay? I just want to start that as an idea in our little heads here. So I want to talk about the idea of Oma a King. I want to talk about the idea that the Holy Land is here, Oma a King. Because indeed in our teachings as Indigenous peoples, we understand that the Holy Land is not someplace else. It is here. And so I'm going to tell you a few stories about what the Holy Land looks like. In my territory, there's a place known as the place where the thunder beings rest in their migration from west to east. That is a place in my territory where the thunder beings rest in their migration from west to east. A place known as the sixth resting place of the Anishinaabe on our migration. A place known as the place where we come into our womanhood. A place known as the Cathedral of the Creator. Those are some of the places that are sacred places in North America. Let me tell you a little bit about those places. So the place where the thunder beings rest in their migration from west to east is on the north side of what is known as Gitchigumi or Lake Superior, where a fifth of the world's water is in those Great Lakes, the most sacred gift perhaps that could be given to any people. That's our territory. And on the north side of that lake, there's a place known as a mountain where Anamiki Waju, which is the place where the thunder beings rest. And it is now today near the city of Thunder Bay, Ontario, to give you a little present-day geography. And at that place, our Anishinaabe people noticed for many years that the thunder beings would stop as they migrated from west to east. And to there we would go and give our offerings to the thunder beings to make sure that there was peace in our world and that we could communicate directly with the spirits, because that is our practice. And we have done that for thousands of years, and we still go to that place. But that mountain is not known as the mountain of the thunder beings now. What that mountain is known as is Mount McKay, which illustrates one of the problems I have with the United States and North America, which is the naming of large mountains after small men. And that's pretty much across the board, right? It's like everything is named after these guys, and I think about it, and there are different aspects to the problem with that. But one of them, simply stated, is this: how could one name something as immortal as a mountain after something as mortal as a human? And that, to me, is the depth of part of our question of identity and place in North America. Because in the rewriting of North American history and the naming and claiming of it by colonial and neo-colonial powers and guys that just passed through, I think that we have lost something in our understanding of place, in our understanding of being, in our relationship to place. The second place, known as the sixth resting place of the Anishinaabe in our migration from east to west, as I described previously, is a place today called Spirit Mountain. And it's outside of the city of Duluth, Minnesota, just to the south of that city. And a few years ago, about 10 years ago, I was petitioned with a SEMA or tobacco, and I was asked to go and speak to the City Council of Duluth. Because what had happened is that the City Council of Duluth had decided that it needed to lease out part of the mountain, in addition to the ski resort which already exists on the mountain, to a developer who would create a large golf course on the mountain. And so I was asked by my relatives if I would speak to the City Council. So I took their tobacco and I got nervous. I know you may not think that I get nervous when I talk, but I always get nervous when I talk. I was super nervous because there was something I had to ask permission to speak of, because it is part of our sacred, our secret teachings. And I had to know what to do. So I prayed hard. I went in there and I came in, and it was a room about this size, not quite. And I went in there, and the room filled up with Native people from many of our Anishinaabe nation throughout the region, our spiritual leaders and our political leaders. And what I have to say proudly is almost every religious denomination came to join us. And we sat there in this room, and then the City Council began their deliberation, and they asked me if I would speak. And it was funny because it was one of those moments, as many of you remember from my experience with running with Ralph Nader, that we were banned from the debates. Do y'all remember that? We were banned from the debates. I had a little picture on a card, not allowed in the debates. So in the city of Duluth, they were having this argument about if I could speak or not. And they were like, no, she could speak for 3 minutes. That was the final thing. I had to laugh. I said, good, I'm good with 3 minutes. But there's these little signs all over Duluth that said, let Winona speak, which really made me laugh. So I went in there with my 3 minutes, respecting the timetable, and I recited our oral history in a very short manner, to say that we had migrated here, and this was our 6th resting place, and from there we were instructed to go to Manakawaning Manis, our sacred island in the middle of Lake Superior, known today as Madeline Island by the white people. And so we knew where to go. And I finished and I sat down and I asked them not to put a ski resort on, not to put a golf course on it. And after I sat down in succession, everybody came up and said very similar things. And I was really proud of us, you know. And then at the end of it, the 5 white guys on the city council, because that's what they all look like out there, they said, one guy pulls up and he has a paper like this. And he says, Ms. Leduc, I got a question to ask you. He said, I'm reading here an anthropologist's report on an explorer's journal. And that anthropologist said, you're wrong. And that anthropologist has said that, in fact, the French people brought the Ojibwe to this territory. And they were the voyageurs. And so I listened to him and I said, that's really interesting because I'm absolutely sure that one of those Anishinaabe men or Anishinaabe people hitched a ride with those voyageurs and said, you are glorious people. I'm glad that you've taken me to this land. I mean, one good way to get a ride, right, across the lake. So I'm sure that that happened. But the interpretation of history was a little wrong because the rest of his relatives were already there. But the point of this is that this is what it is like being an indigenous person in this millennium in North America, is that you will have your oral history corrected by a white guy with a Xerox who tell you that, in fact, you are wrong. And that is what it is like today in the United States, is there's a white guy with a Xerox someplace about to rewrite our history one more time. And so what I want to say is that proudly, we did win that battle. And the city of Duluth did not issue that permit. And we're very, very grateful to them. But I have to say that it was a challenging situation, and that challenging situation remains today, because in that hearing and in other hearings that I've been to, I remember them asking me, how sacred is it? And that's a very interesting question to ask someone. Like, is there like a sacred spectrum or like a weighing, or you understand what I'm saying? It's like, how do you decide, and who is in charge of how sacred it is, right? And they were like, then the next question was, is there multiple use of a sacred site? And I was like, so what? We will pray between the 6th and 7th hole and it'll be good, right? You see what I'm saying is like, that is kind of the absurdity of some of this. But I point this out to you because this is a constant struggle for Indigenous people. And as many of you know, it was not until 1978, with the passage of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, that our right to pray and worship and carry on our own ceremonies was actually allowed and legal. Whether it is the Sundance ceremony, our Madewan Society, our big drums, or any of our ceremonies. It was not allowed. It was not legal in the United States, which is quite ironic in a country which was founded on the premise of religious freedom. And so that continues today. And as I looked, today in the, this is the story of a place called Oak Flats. And this place, Oak Flats, is where young women come into womanhood. This is an Apache woman in Times Square at the apex of the battle against Rio Tinto Zinc and John McCain, who approved the transfer of land to Rio Tinto Zinc, the homeland of the Apache people, and the place where the Apache people, the young women, had their womanhood ceremonies. This is our women of Oak Flats. This is our Apache women. And this is them conducting their ceremonies. That is who we are. We are not people who live in the past. We are people who live in the present. Our spiritual traditions are traditions that are perhaps different than yours. I myself, as you may have gathered, am not a Christian. I'm a member of our Madewan Society. To the best of my knowledge, it is about 5,000 years old. We've been here a long time. We figure like we got it down. And what I want to say is that our practice, however, is a practice which must be reaffirmed. That is how it works. We're called a reaffirmation religion. We're not commemorative. We reaffirm our relationship to the Creator and to place through a continuous set of practices and how we lead our lives. Minopamata. This is a dam project in Northern California called the Shasta Dam that will flood the most sacred places of the Winnemem-Wintu people who do not have federal recognition in the United States, but people who also have a right to continue their existence. They are the people who have salmon, and in their language and their understanding, the Nur or the salmon is who gave them their songs and their voice. And that is why salmon are today silent. That is the story of a people and their relations. And these relatives, the older brothers of them and the older sisters of them, are salmon. So to them, it is not only a place, it is a way of life, and it is all of their relatives who live there. And this is the story of today, the Trump administration deciding to target particularly Bears Ear National Monument. And so when I heard of that, it is a cathedral of the Creator, a healing place and a place to reconnect to the Creator. I called my friend Jim Enote, a Zuni historian, a man who is at the Zuni Museum. And so Bears Ear National Monument protects 1.3 million acres of public lands surrounding Bears Ears, a pair of mesas. This is down in what is known as Utah today. This is a sacred territory of the Dene Nation, of the Hopi, the Ute Mountain Ute, the Ute tribe, and the Pueblo of Zuni, all who have ancestral ties to this area. As I asked Jim to tell me the story today, he said this: "The values of this nation reflect our collective social profits and losses. As a young boy, I remember holding my mother's hand as she led me to a public restroom. At the door, a whites-only sign stopped her from taking me further. That sign and my mother's tears of hesitancy gave birth to a heartache that tortures me to this day. Ironically, that public restroom was near an Air Force base in Gallup, New Mexico, where my father was serving our country, and earlier where my grandfather received training as a B-17 tail gunner during World War II. During a recent visit to Bears Ears with Zuni elders, we approached a massive sandstone alcove sheltering an ancestral Pueblo village. We greeted the people who lived and are buried there and gave offerings to them. Not so much different from the ways other cultures bring flowers to cemeteries to honor their loved ones. As we made our way to the alcove, we saw that the village had been vandalized by pot hunters. Staring at the damage done by the looting was horrifying to all of us. I suppose in some people's minds we are the conquered, so the willingness to pursue ill-gotten gains that benefit a few is simply a given. But if Native Americans are truly a part of the social and cultural fabric of this nation, why do we not receive the civility and respect afforded to other citizens? It's time that we realize that Native peoples are not only citizens of this great nation, we are indigenous to it, part of its original fabric. We are of this place, Oma a King. We have given to it and we've received little in return. The Bears Ears National Monument, as proposed, would declare two things. First, that our society can be nudged to abandon its complacency and encouraged to understand and respect Native peoples, culture, and traditions. And second, just as important, the monument would endow our society with a new imagination, creating a meeting place where science, Native knowledge, and thoughtful conservation policy are together given equal and just attentiveness. That is the monument, and these are the people, and this is the place. I've not yet gone there, but I expect that I will go there in the next month to also offer my prayers and reaffirm my relationship to place. So let me talk about what else is happening in the world. Some of you may have seen this in Brasilia today. That is the capital of Brazil, where thousands of indigenous people descended on the Brazilian Congress as that Congress moved ahead to continue its work in allocating the lands of indigenous people to mining companies, to agribusiness, and to the corporations that exist. The struggle of indigenous people to protect our Mother Earth is a struggle which continues. It is unrelenting because she is the only mother that we know. We have no place to go from our territories, and our very existence is contingent upon the protection and the relationship we have with our Mother Earth. So let me talk a little bit about our challenge. I thought you'd like this. This is a little bit about the paradigm of two worlds. There are many ways to put it. You know, I'm an economist by training. I spend a lot of my time thinking about what is indigenous economics and what I will call Windigo economics. Windigo economics. I've had different words for it. You know, sometimes I was calling it predator economics. But let me just say that a people who have lived in the same place for 5,000 years got an idea how to do it. From what I can figure out, y'all don't got a clue. That be simply stated. That is to say that it's causing so much extinction of so many species, so much destruction in such a short time. It is quite obvious that you have no idea what you're doing. So let me talk about what predator economics looks like. It's predicated perhaps on the fact that, we consume a third of the world's resources or something like that, right? With a very small percentage of the world's population. That level of overconsumption requires constant intervention into other people's lands, constant violations of other people's rights. And it creates a dynamic that has continued for many, many years. It is, in fact, what I refer to as a Windigo. Now, I was in class this morning. I really enjoyed my time in class here. I did have that anxiety about that finals coming up moment. I don't know if any of you still had it. I'm 57 years old, and I can still feel finals are coming. But a Windigo, I had to look it up in, grandfather Google? I think that's how we refer to this, grandfather Google. I had to go ask my grandfather Google. And what grandfather Google said is a Windigo is a creature that was once human but is transformed into an immortal evil spirit when it took the practice of cannibalism. Windigos are cursed to wander the land eternally seeking to fulfill their voracious appetite for human flesh. Windigos are believed, I will tell you they do, to live in northern woods of Minnesota and the north central regions of Canada. Kenora, Ontario is said to have been given the title of the Windigo capital of the world. That's what happens when you look things up in Wikipedia. Who would know that that was the Windigo capital of the world? So, rumored to be giant spirits, 15 feet tall, voracious appetites, glowing eyes, long yellowed fangs, terrible claws, and overly long tongues. Pretty much terrifying. Right? This is someone that we do not want to be around in our territory. But what I will say is that we have created an economic system here in the United States, which is pretty much a Windigo economy. And what it looks like is this. This is the Animas River 2 years ago, after the King Gold Mine EPA dam failure. It was a dam failure by the EPA. Do you remember this? They were out checking it, something like that. It could have been, though, in Brazil, where in 2015 the collapse of 2 Brazilian dams and a mine in the Rio Doco River sent a toxic sludge over villages and changed the geography of an entire world. The world that is the only world that those people knew. The sheer volume of water and mining sludge disgorged by the dams across nearly 300 miles is staggering, the equivalent to 25,000 Olympic swimming pools or the volume carried by 187 oil tankers. That's what a cannibal economy in its destruction looks like. This is what it looks like in terms of climate change. You're not going to get the climate change lecture because you already got that one. You guys got that one down. If you've not been watching Fox News, you know that this is what's going on with our temperatures in the world, right? This is what the Windigo looks like in terms of clear cutting. This is the laying to waste of forest ecosystems throughout the world for all kinds of things that are not necessary. And this is the acidification of the ocean with climate change. In our prophecies as Anishinaabe people, we are told that there is a choice between 2 paths. This is known as the time of the 7th fire. And in the time of the 7th fire, we are told that we as Anishinaabe people would have a choice between 2 paths. One path, they say, would be well-worn but scorched. The other path, they say, would not be well-worn, and it would be green. And it would be our choice upon which path to embark. So this is the scorched path. This is what fracking looks like from the air. It is what is known as extreme extraction. Extreme extraction is what occurs when you have consumed as much of the fossil fuels resources of this world as we have. In my life and your life, we've consumed about half the world's known fossil fuel resources, right? We did it. I had a good time. Did y'all have a good time? Let's be honest. It's been a blast. I've had a really good time consuming this level. I've had my, did you guys all get your flowers from Colombia this week? You know what I'm saying. Sometimes I just like to order that Fiji water. I'm talking about because I feel like I should have water for the furthest part of the planet. Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? It's like it is absurdity, the level of the fossil fuels economy and our level of consumption and entitlement associated with that. We are complicit. That is the fact. Yet at the same time, what I want is like I'm looking out there and the last remaining resources that are there, the last remaining fossil fuels that are there are not easy to get. The time of those gushing oil fields in Oklahoma is gone. Now what you have is you can drill 20,000 feet under the ocean and hope that's going to work out for you, right? Until you get something like the Deepwater Horizon, right? My personal feeling, I'm just going to say, is that only mermaids should be 20,000 feet under the ocean. Like we just should not be there. Some places we should just not go. That's what I feel like. Extreme behavior is when you blow off the top of like 500 mountains in Appalachia to ship the coal to where? China? India? Not here, because they don't even burn them in coal plants in this country anymore. That's extreme behavior. Extreme behavior is when you put 602 chemicals down in the ground, blow up the bedrock of Mother Earth, and act like that's going to work out for you because, oh, that's right, Dick Cheney got the Halliburton Amendment passed. That's when you have a set of laws that reflects the rights of men, not the rights of the Creator. And extreme behavior is the tar sands. They're replumbing North America's infrastructure right now for the benefit of oil companies. That is what is happening, and that is the battle that we are seeing. And it is this era that we are all in. It's this moment that we are all in, the end of the fossil fuel economy. And in those extreme last minutes where there is so little left that is easy to get, we become a little bit like, I don't know if any of you got an addict in your family, but I feel like we're acting like a big junkie. That is to say, like, if you got an addict, sometimes they get to this place where like they do bad stuff to get their fix. And that's us. We do bad stuff to get our fix and we pretend that we didn't do that. That's what addicts do. They say, I didn't do that. Someone else made me do that. You ever hear that one? All of that stuff, right? And so we got to this place where that's the kind of people where we are, where we're engaging in extreme behavior, whether it is, destroying and declaring war on countries, or whether it is just declaring such a war on our environment. Extreme behavior to get the last parts of our fix. And what I want is, I think, probably what y'all want, which is kind of an elegant transition out of this, an elegant transition out of the fossil fuel economy. On the last throes of that, this is where we're at. This is my territory. These are some of our spiritual beings. We'll say half man, half spirit. Nana Boozhoo and his mother. They are in our rice fields. This is the artist named Rabbit Strickland. This is my battle. This is what Judith discussed. 4 years ago, the Enbridge company announced that it wanted to put a pipeline through the heart of our wild rice territory. Canadian corporation, single largest pipeline company in North America. It was a fracked oil pipeline proposed to come out of North Dakota. The essential route was the route that they proposed. They had to have that route. They said there was no other route. They said it was an essential route, and we fought them. We prayed. We had our ceremonies. We had our feasts. And I dreamed that we should ride our horses against the current of the oil. And so we took to horse, and we rode our horses, and we prayed that that oil would not come through that pipe, and it would not come our way. And so we kept that prayer up for 4 years. We intervened in the regulatory process, and the Friends of the Headwaters, colleagues of my organization, Honor the Earth, filed a lawsuit forcing an environmental impact statement on that pipeline. Environmental impact statements are expensive for corporations, and time is very expensive for corporations that are hanging on by a bare thread to all of their holdings and all of their greed. And so 4 years in, after citizens, people turned out, tribal governments turned out by the hundreds to oppose this, one day after our fourth ride along the proposed pipeline route, one day after the fourth ride, on August 2nd of this last year, the Enbridge Corporation announced that it would not continue with its plans to forward the sandpiper across our lands. But what I will say is that it is a bit of a bittersweet victory, because that same day the Enbridge Corporation announced that it was going to become 28% owner of the Dakota Access Pipeline. And so that company moved west to some place where they did not see the strength of the same resistance, and they had what is called, I believe, regulatory capture, which is when oil companies write all of your policies for the state of North Dakota. And it is a state which has been disempowered and is run today by oil companies and agribusiness. And so they went there, and it is also a state that we refer to as the Deep North. That is what North Dakota looks like. And if anybody saw either the footage of Standing Rock, you saw what Bull Connor looks like in North Dakota. And that's Sheriff Kyle Kirchman. That's what you look like. Bull Connor, or also in North Dakota. It is called the Deep North. Our people have been treated as third-class citizens. Every statistic you do not want to have, we continue to have in North Dakota, and the Standing Rock and every other reservation. Infrastructure that is third world, could be first world, because after all, we are a first world country. But then, of course, most of our infrastructure on our reservations is so far behind, whether it is the road or the 50-year-old hospital that serves that community. And so they had not cared, but what they did is they moved out there. And this is what we saw. Now, a lot of you saw this, but I know that for a long time the media out of New York did not cover this. I think the first media that came from New York was Amy Goodman. Thank you for coming, Amy. And as you may also know, Amy was arrested and charged for her work as a journalist. I think she was charged with rioting out there. But this is what it looks like, and this is what civil society looks like when the rules of engagement have been violated. That is to say that all of us here would believe that we would have a First Amendment right in the United States. But what is clear is that in North Dakota, you do not have a First Amendment right, and the rights of corporations supersede the rights of individuals. That is what we know. And so what happened to those of us who stood, and we are not protesters, we are protectors. We are water protectors. And I'm very, very proud to know so many and to call myself a water protector, because we are the people who believe that our water is worth more than their oil. Our water that gives us life is our life. And so we stood and we faced things that you should not face. We faced this equipment. This equipment, the piece on the right is called an MRAP, Mine-Resistant Armored Personnel Carrier. Mine-resistant armored personnel carrier. And to the best of my knowledge, North Dakota has no landmines. You understand what I'm saying? They got a lot of, unfortunately, they have a lot of nuclear missile sites. Right? I'm not sure how that's going to work out with all that fracking, just like a little note to self. But, you know, no landmines. And so, and no buildings. Stutzman County, where that piece of equipment comes from, may have 2,000 people in it. May have 2,000 people in it. So there's nothing that would warrant a piece of equipment like that in North Dakota. But pieces of equipment like that are all over this country because they have been surplused by the U.S. military to civilian police forces. And there is no need for civilians to be facing equipment like that. The piece that is to the left of it is called an LRAD. An LRAD is a long-range acoustic device. It is intended to blow up your eardrums. And so that was what North Dakota decided to use on people trying to protect their water on the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota. And to me, that is what is wrong when civil society has gone awry. And so to those of you here, I have to make a plea on this. I have to make a plea because North Dakota was abandoned. It was abandoned by everybody. That is to say that over the past 50 years, the population has continued to decline. You know, a few years ago, about 1985, the Poppers came out from Rutgers University, a couple of demographers, and they did this report, and they said, there are so many people who have left North Dakota, you might as well just pull up them fences and return it to the Buffalo Commons. That's what they said. They were chased out of North Dakota as heretics. And then in 2000, I saw them invited back by the North Dakota Farm Bureau Association to talk about the possibility of maybe doing that. So everybody left North Dakota. In the meantime, in 2005, with the passage of the Halliburton Amendment, it reopened the bottom of the mining, of the mining and the oil development. The bottom, you could use fracking with absolutely, you know, you just do whatever you want to in North Dakota. And that changed everything in North Dakota. The boom came in with it, all of the ugliness, the man camps, the sexual assaults, the contamination of everything that is out there, and the loss of just common sense and decency, frankly. In the meantime, no one was out there. No one has been out there for a long time. Civil society abandoned North Dakota. What I mean by that is the American Civil Liberties Union, of which I'm a big fan, had one person that covered North and South Dakota. You let me know how that's going to work out, right? The Sierra Club had one person, right? That's not good. That's not good. That's when you've been abandoned by civil society. And so, a lot of people didn't want to live in North Dakota because it's kind of cold. You can't get like your Starbucks or all your cool stuff you know what I'm saying? There's like not all the cool organic places. And so they said, I want to live here. I want to go live someplace cool like New York City, or I want to go live someplace cool like Madison, Wisconsin, or Berkeley. They left. And so you had a lot of older white people that were there, laid prey by a lot of oil companies, and things went bad. And so our people were treated pretty badly in North Dakota, and that's why we call it the Deep North. But there is part of all of us that is there, because, if you think what happens in North Dakota doesn't affect you, what happened at Standing Rock affects us all. Whether it is the criminalization of dissent, the criminalization of First Amendment rights, there are 840 people that were charged out there. A lot of them look like you. 840 people that were charged. Every one of those individuals was strip and cavity searched. Those people were overcharged with all kinds of things, whether it is rioting or felony offenses. Many of those people were put in dog kennels because they did not have room for them in the county jails. It was so overburdened, and they had their names, their numbers they had numbers on their hands so that they could keep track of them. That's what civil society looks like when it goes awry and the rules of engagement go wrong. But it is more than that, because many of our people were hurt. This is when they tear gas you and put chemicals on you and you're in the water. And you're a water protector, and they hit you with that at close range. They hit you right in the face with that. That's what they do. And then they shoot rubber bullets at you. And they take out your eye. Or Sophia Walensky here from New York, she lost most of her arm to a compression grenade. But what happened when she went to the hospital is the FBI anti-terrorism squad came and took her belongings. And she is the subject of a grand jury investigation because in North Dakota, they want to act as if she blew up her own arm. They want to pretend that the rubber bullets did not fly at our people. They want to pretend that the tear gas did not come at our people. They want to pretend that the beanbags did not come at our people. But if any of you get a chance, you should see a film called Awake. I was privileged to see it earlier this week. It played at Tribeca, and I believe you can figure out a way to watch it online. It shows all the footage that was taken by our people. Map man Myron Dewey, a journalist, also had his drone taken many times by the state of North Dakota and the police authorities. So to me, it's a bit of a crisis, and my crisis, our crisis, is everyone's crisis, right? Because it is a crisis of First Amendment rights, religious freedom. What is the agreement in civil society? What is the agreement? What is our agreement? That is what the militarization of Indian country looks like. And that is what you don't want to see, but that is very much what we saw in North Dakota. And that battle, however, continues. And in part of what makes me so angry about that is this, is that, I'm an economist, and I've spent most of my life looking at stupid energy projects. Let me just be honest. I would really rather work on what I want than to deal with one more ridiculous project that is proposed by an energy corporation. And it's a funny thing because people act like we should be talking about these like these are sane ideas. They are not sane ideas. They are ideas about greed and short-term profits. They have nothing to do with the well-being of this country or the well-being of the people. So in this case, I'm going to give you a perfect example. I'm not the best at math, but I'm not bad. I'm a lot better than the president, for instance. Let me just give you that. So just say this. So in 2016, there was 900,000 barrels of oil a day coming out of the Bakken oil fields. 900,000 barrels a day coming out of the Bakken oil fields. In fact, the Bakken oil fields busted about 2 years ago when the price of Saudi oil went down. Because to produce oil in extreme extraction, where you have to keep producing and drilling new wells for fracking, means that you have to have it above $60 a barrel. And so the price of oil went down, and when it went down, the Bakken crashed. 85% drop in drilling rigs. Man camps closed up. 13,500 people moved out of North Dakota. And the wells are silent. And you don't just restart those. So in 2016, there's 900,000 barrels of oil coming out of the Bakken a day. In 2017, Lynn Helms, who is the minister or the commissioner of mines and pretty much everything in North Dakota from what I can figure, Lynn Helms reported that there would be, in 2017, 900,000 barrels of oil coming out of the Bakken. And then Lynn Helms said, that in 2019, there would be 900,000 barrels of oil a day coming out of the Bakken oil fields because they busted. So please explain to me why it is so essential to work, why it is so essential to have a 570,000 barrel a day Dakota Access Pipeline. To the best of my knowledge, all of the oil that has been going out of the Bakken is already out on some pipelines or trains that are leaving the Bakken. There is no need to add another 570,000 barrels a day of capacity to that. That pipeline is about greed and hatred. That is what that is about. And if you ask me, I am not, I don't really know how to deal with that except for my personal position is I hope they choke on their greed. I hope they choke on their greed because that is what needs to happen to a Windigo. They must choke on their own greed. So this is a piece of art that is there at Standing Rock. And I really like this art. It is from what is called an effigy pipe. And I've not seen the original pipe, but it came out of, I believe it came out of Pawnee Territory. And so I'm sure that you have seen in museums a pipe that is a native pipe. And so this is a small figure that would sit on the pipe, and then there is a bowl in front of it, right? And so this pipe, this is an artist's copy of that. This artist's name is Charles Rencontre, and I met him at the Institute for American Indian Arts in Santa Fe a few years ago, and he took me to see this, and I fell in love with this. But he brought this piece of art to Standing Rock, and this, as a pipe, the pipe is called Not Afraid to Look at the White Man. And so then he brought this art, and that man is sitting on the banks of the Missouri River. Because what I want to say is that after all they have done to our water protectors, after all they have done to us, we are not afraid. We are not afraid, and we are not going anywhere. And how I know that we are going nowhere is a couple of things. There are camps everywhere now. There are refugee water protectors at my house. That is to say, I have some beautiful young blonde co-eds from Pennsylvania who are charged with felonies. They are 21 years old. By the state of North Dakota. I said, that is not fair. And so they're staying with me. They're working at Honor the Earth for their summer internship. And then we're going to send them off to college after we pay for their lawyers to defeat the felony convictions, right? Because our people should have justice. And I know what justice looks like out there. Not only does it look like that the 840 people who are charged, we had 32 dismissals last month. Our people should get justice. It's going to be a hard thing, though, and we're going to need your help on that. And the reason I say that is I know you're all a powerful bunch of people. But at some point, think about North Dakota. I want to put a little note. Remember North Dakota. What I want to say is that the National Jury Project did a review called the Jury Review in North Dakota of the jury pool for the water protectors, right? They interviewed the jury pool, and the jury pool of North Dakota, 82% of them believe the water protectors should be convicted. Did I call this the Deep North? That is why we call it the Deep North. It's a bad thing. So what I want to say is if any of you have relatives or know people that went out there, join them. I'm asking people, I would really like to see what I'm calling the Freedom Riders. Go to North Dakota, go to court and stand there or sit there with your water protectors. Sit there and support them to let the world know and let North Dakota know that people are watching them. And it matters, because civil society should not go awry. So I would like justice for my water protectors. I also would like to say that, to me, there is another way that you make justice. So you have a $3.9 billion Dakota Access Pipeline. It is entirely a waste of fossil fuels infrastructure. I know that Union Seminary has divested, as have many institutions and churches and banks, not only in the Dakota Access Pipeline, but anyone who is somewhat enlightened and is reviewing the economic data will know that fossil fuels are a bad investment into the future. That is why people are moving from there. And so as I say that, I know that the UN Secretary General reported that institutions representing $5.2 trillion are divesting and moving towards a renewable energy economy. So this puzzles me because even Enbridge, my nemesis, they announced now another pipeline they want to bring our way. We defeat one, and now we face a 915,000 barrel a day Line 3. That is the single largest tar sands pipeline in the country. And I know that the president is not good at math, and I also know that Justin Trudeau is not good at math. And how I know this is that between Mr. Willy-nilly down there in Washington approving and using his little special pen to do all kinds of really nefarious things, he approved all those pipelines. Remember, he approved the Keystone XL again. He said, go back and sign up. So the amount of pipelines that they have proposed to come out of Canada, out of the tar sands, between the Keystone XL, our Line 3, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and a pipeline known as Energy East that is intended to go across Canada, will probably end up in Maine at some LNG terminal, right? Liquefied natural gas terminal or something bad like that, right? The amount of oil that is produced in those represents 2.4 million barrels a day more capacity than is projected to be needed for pipelines coming out of the tar sands. Y'all follow me? Their math's so bad. They are overbuilding pipeline proposals by that large of a factor, twice as many. And that is, again, about greed. That is a Windigo economy. It has absolutely nothing to do with our well-being and the future of the planet. Anybody who would have any sense would know that that is some bad math. And so again, I say, I hope that they choke on their greed. And I know that I myself, I'm here, I'm privileged to be with you. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity. But when I go home, I prepare to go to the Enbridge shareholders meetings with my sisters. And we will go there because I believe corporations who make decisions, whether they are in Calgary or whether they are in New York, decisions that affect the well-being of my children and my grandchildren should see my face. You should be accountable for your decisions. You do not get to make them so far away and never see the face of people whose lives you intend to destroy. So let me tell you where we're going. This is my community. This is who I work for. The mother lode of wild rice there. Each year in succession for thousands of years, our people have harvested wild rice. Twice the protein and half the calories of white rice or brown rice. We're the good guys here. We're good in our food. And all you got to do is take care of your lakes and your ecosystem. So let me talk about a plan that I will refer to as, I call this, I think it's better than the Trump plan. I refer to this as the Sitting Bull plan. Let me talk about where it is we need to go. And I think that a lot of you know. Now let me just say as a side to this, about a year ago, I had the privilege of being in a place called Sitka, Alaska. Have any of you ever been to Sitka, Alaska? Isn't that like one of the most beautiful places? It is. It's like a place where you feel like you want to find an excuse to live there, right? Like, I'm sure that some of you have had those feelings. I'm like, I will stay here. And then I'm like, oh, I have children, I must go home. So I sat there on the edge of of a sound. It is a deep sound with a fishing port in Alaska, and it is so stunning. And so I sat there and I watched, and it was during the time when the salmon had come home. And as I watched the salmon coming home, I watched the bears come, and I watched the eagles come down and collect them. And as I watched this ideal scene, I looked, and to the left of my view appeared a cruise ship coming in. And I thought to myself, that is not very nice. And I looked at this cruise ship. I was trying to concentrate on this beautiful scene, and I saw this cruise ship, and then I was like, how's that going to work? And then I keep watching, and I'm like, well, what are they going to do when they get in here? Right? I mean, this is like the kind of questions you ask when you're watching this in slow motion. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden I look, and the cruise ship turns a 180, basically on a dime, and then heads on out. And I was like, that's what we got to do. We got to turn a 180 on a dime. We got to think about how we're going to do things right, how we're going to restore our relationship and make things right. So let me say this is the Sitting Bull plan. This is my friend Kim Smith, one of my board members. And this is up in Peterborough, Vermont, but it's a traveling art exhibit. So this is when America was great. Did I mention that? I have a different idea of when America was great. When there was 8,000 varieties of corn. When there's 8,000 varieties of corn, we were totally not like just hanging out and slacking before Monsanto came here. We developed 8,000 varieties of corn. And I'll tell you what, that women are the best for seed selection, and that on a worldwide scale, while Monsanto and DuPont and Syngenta and Kraft have a $13 trillion food economy. They only produce 30% of the world's food. The majority of food is produced by people who look like me all around the world, and that's pretty good stuff. So what I know is that my idea of making America great is that. My idea of making America great is when you had 250 species of grass and 50 million buffalo. That's when America was great. Single largest migratory herd in the world. When you had passenger pigeons that darkened the skies and fish in every river and you could drink the water from every lake and stream. That's when America was great. And to me, I live in a place where you can still drink the water from a lake. You can still eat the food, and you can get sugar from a tree. That's a pretty good gig. You know, we call it Minopamataziwan, or the good life. So to get there, this is what you got to do. This is some projects I worked on. Dene Solar, putting solar on the Dene Community College. That is solar in Shiprock, New Mexico. This is agrobiodiversity, the restoration of local corn varieties, because it turns out that our corn varieties, this is a hominy corn or pasoli corn, twice the protein, half the calories of market varieties. I always tell the story that when my father came to see me at Harvard, he said, "Winona, you're a really smart woman, but I don't want to hear your philosophy if you can't grow corn." And so I became a corn grower. And the first time I grew it, it was only about this big, and I thought I had failed because it was short. And then as I watched my fields, what I noticed is that my corn, this is called Bear Island Flint, was frost resistant, and it was drought resistant. It was kind of short and tough. And when the big winds came through, they tipped over Monsanto's varieties, but my varieties stood. And so what I know is that you need to grow local. You need to quit shipping your food from everywhere. And you don't want the food from the Central Valley of California, because a couple of years ago during the drought, they approved the use of fracking wastewater for food in the Central Valley. So maybe you don't want to get all your food from there anymore. You want to have it local and accountable and consume a lot less fossil fuels. That's how you turn things all the way around, is you change your food system and you change your energy system. And this is where you get your wind. Turns out that Indian reservations are the windiest place in the country. And as I said, Standing Rock Reservation, if they, instead of spending the $3.9 billion on that pipeline, they just bought solar, they would have had about 163,000 houses with solar on them, plus 323 2-megawatt wind turbines, and about 61,000 passive solar units. Now you ask me what energy justice looks like, and thinking for the generations ahead, that's what it looks like. It's not fossil fuel pipelines. It's infrastructure for people, not for oil companies. They are proposing to build billions of dollars worth of pipelines for oil companies in this country. And right now I have 323 miles of pipeline sitting dead in northern Minnesota, sitting in piles of a pipe that they will never put in, the sandpiper. And what I told Enbridge in the state of Minnesota, both of them, as I said, you should send those pipes to Flint. There are people in this country who want pipes. There are people in this country who need pipes. And that's where we need to send our pipes. You need to divest, you all know that. This is my village. I live in a beautiful place on a lake with my grandchildren, but the village that is closest to me is this. It was documented in a film that came out last year called The Seventh Fire. We have a project known as the Eighth Fire Project. But the Seventh Fire took a snapshot of the meth epidemic in my village, because my village is no different than most people's villages. My situation is no different than most people. We are dealing with every problem you don't want to have, and there is no one going to save us but ourselves. And we know that. So we looked at that picture and we didn't like that movie, and so this is what we did to our village. We started by painting the tagged up houses, painting them with murals. I was inspired by Balmy Alley in San Francisco, in the Mission District. I said, we can make our life beautiful, and perhaps if we feel more beautiful and live in a beautiful place, we'll feel better about ourselves. So we will do that. We put solar thermal panels on our houses because in my village, on my reservation, people can freeze to death in the winter. They can freeze to death in the winter because it is very cold and there is no one to help them. And most people have to choose between eating and heating in my community. And so we should have wood stoves and passive solar in order to keep our houses warm. And my situation is no different than so many other rural and poor people in northern cities. That's what we need, is a way to reduce our heating bills and to make sure that our people are warm. This is guest artists, guest muralists who came to do these paintings in our village. And this is our idea of what appropriate energy infrastructure looks like. It's a microgrid with a bunch of solar in our villages. So the Enbridge Corporation is proposing this $7 billion pipeline, and they are a company with a $7 billion renewable energy portfolio. And each day I ask them why we must be given a pipeline by them and why we cannot have renewable energy. Why must they bring us the end of the fossil fuel economy, the end of the Windigo economy, when we could evolve to something that is better? So this is the story, and this is what I work on in my community. So in the broader implications of this, the Six Nations Iroquois Confederacy is really who should have the credit for the drafting of the Constitution of the United States. As all of you know, your founding fathers went and took a bunch of notes and tried to figure out how you run a representational democracy for thousands of years. And the people who have that experience are the Iroquois Confederacy. And so as I think about them, I think that, y'all know there's some big omissions in those notes by Ben Franklin and all, like that whole thing about women. Yeah. In the Iroquois Nation, women appoint, it's called condole, and remove chiefs. That right is held by women. Really, really important omission, I think. Something that things would be a little bit different. So as I think about where we are going, what I want to say is that the answers are not perhaps in this country. The answers are elsewhere. And what I would say is that in the broader context, as you know, the Bolivian government several years ago decided to adopt the rights of Mother Earth as a part of their constitution. That would mean that the rights of Mother Earth supersede the rights of corporations. Now, we live in a country where you know that the rights of corporations are considered natural persons under the law. And the rights of corporations, as evidenced in North Dakota and on the Standing Rock Reservation, supersede the rights of humans to live on this land. And I think that we must change that. We're going to have to change that if we're going to live. And so perhaps we may learn from people like the Bolivians who adopted the rights of Mother Earth, and they said Mother Earth has the right to life, it's the right to the maintenance and the integrity of life systems and their natural processes, to diversity of life, the right to preservation of the differentiation and variety of beings that comprise Mother Earth, to water. Mother Earth has the right to water. It is the right in the preservation of the quality and composition of water, to clean air, to equilibrium, to restoration, and to live free of contamination. That, I believe, is not only the rights of Mother Earth, but that should be all of our rights. But in order to secure those, we have to protect our mother, because that is where we get our life. This is where I live, Gawawi-Ekamag, Round Lake, in the middle of our reservation. It is our territory. And recently, what I know is that in the fall of 2016, the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin, what is known as Wisconsin, was the first North American indigenous nation to enshrine the rights of nature as a part of their constitution. Perhaps the United States should look to others to learn how to behave in the world. And then I would say that this March, 2 rivers were declared as legal persons endowed with human-style rights. A couple of years ago, the Wanganui River was granted the same legal rights as a human being in New Zealand, or in Aotearoa as it is called. And in March of this year, the Indian court declared the Ganges River, considered sacred in the Hindu faith to be a person, and its main tributary, the Yamuna, to be accorded the status of living human entities, as well as the Himalayan glaciers. In the broader context of enlightened legal practices, it is clear that the rights of Mother Earth need to be an essential part of the rights of our society. I would say that there is hope. I know that there is hope because in the time that we are in, there are changes. And there are some basic things that I see those changes in. I will tell you, I was visiting with a woman earlier today who is with the Cowboys and Indian Alliance. And a couple of years ago, I rode with the Cowboys and Indians to Washington, D.C. I rode on my horse. I was terrified. If any of you have ridden a horse, it's terrifying to ride a horse in Washington, D.C. There's like sirens and lights and cameras and banners. So I cannot say I wept on my horse, but it was close. Then I got off my horse and I walked to my teepee, which was on the Washington Mall. And I always like to say that many times because I think it sounds cool to say I had a teepee on the Washington Mall, right? So I went and I got in my teepee on the Washington Mall, and I was there in my teepee, and cool people were in my teepee, like Neil Young was in my teepee, right? You know, Daryl Hannah was in the teepee, like cool people were in and out of the teepee. And my two 14-year-old sons were in the teepee. And so I'm sitting in my teepee on the Washington Mall, and this guy sticks his head in the teepee, and he says, "Ms. LeDuc, would you like to go for a ride in my car?" And I thought, oh, that's such a great pickup line from the 80s. Why would I want to go for a ride in your car, buddy? I don't know you. You know, and I'm looking at him, and my two 14-year-old boys are going, "No, Mom, you are so not going for a ride in that strange man's car." And I'm looking at the guy, and the guy says, "It's a Tesla." And I said, "Oh, yes, I would like to go for a ride in your car." Right? So I walked out of my teepee into a red four-door Tesla. And I want to say that's what an elegant transition out of the fossil fuel era looks like, and that's what I want. Right? And what I think is you should all basically want the same thing, because that's where we need to go. And we could say a lot of things about the price of Teslas and stuff, but what I know is this, and it's a law of thermodynamics from what I understand, but a professor at Harvard was talking about this, and what she said is that the reason that the fossil fuel economy, Mara Prentice is her name, she's a professor of physics, she said the reason the fossil fuel economy is going to end is a simple question of physics. She said the combustion engine in your car, in my truck, or any vehicle you drive, the combustion engine in a car is 16% efficient. Go figure that. Between the drivetrain, the wheels, like I don't even understand all that, but like every piece of that has to move, you lose efficiency. It's 16% efficient. And the engine in a Tesla or an electric car is 65% efficient. So my question to the enlightened people here and in this country is, you know, I know that President Trump has decided that fuel efficiency in vehicles is not important. I find that funny because I'm really not sure who wants to have 12 miles a gallon in a car. You know what I'm saying? When he did that, I was like, wow. But what enlightened society would like to hang around with an engine that is 16% efficient when you could be 65% efficient? And that is what I mean about turning the cruise ship at a 180. And that is what it looks like, is you change your economic system from a Windigo economy to an economy which is predicated on the rights of nature. It's predicated on our ability to sustain ourselves and reaffirm our relationship because we are respectful to the natural world. It's predicated on a set of changes that will move us from this economy which consumes a third of the world's resources, and from a society which is based on conquest to, in fact, a society which is based on survival. And I know that that is possible. I've seen those changes, and I want to thank you for your time. And as I look at where we are today, those moments in this day are clear. This is said to be the time of the seventh fire, and we have a choice between two paths. One is well-worn, but it is scorched, and the other is not well-worn, and it is green. It is said by our ancestors and by our prophets that it would be our choice upon which path to embark. And a couple of weeks ago, I was laughing because I saw, I believe, the 60 missiles and the mother of all bombs, right? That was expensive. And I believe that if we had used that, you could have done all the repairs in Union Seminary, and you'd be good, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like what you want to do with your money, guys. And so to me, it is this moment at every level when we need to make a choice upon which path we are passing and reaffirm it is our commitment with the Creator. Miigwech, thank you for your time.
So we have time for at least one question. We've got some.
That'd be really good if there's just one.
Yeah,
right?
well, I have two. We've been getting them on note cards. So I want to start with this question, and it has to do with violence against women. And the question is, What is the role of women in the movement, and can you discuss the connection between violence against women and violence against the land?
Yeah, I mean, it is a historic relationship that has continued and continues today. And to my knowledge, the more extreme the technology, the more violence against women. And, today, and it is also, something that I've heard more than once, and I actually heard it in a regulatory proceeding in California. It reminded me a lot of a woman who has been subjected to rape, and maybe she's been subjected to more than one rape. And then there is this perception that somehow it was okay that you could rape her again. And that occurs in kind of regulatory and legal proceedings, like it's okay if she was raped more than once, or it's okay because it already happened. And what I want to say is that that's what happens with the environment. Because in California, for instance, this last year, I believe that they passed in a couple of counties a regulation that would say that if an aquifer was already contaminated, you could continue to contaminate it. And that is a direct example of the relationship between how we treat women and how we treat our Mother Earth. The idea that you can continue to contaminate something because you've already done damage to it is wrong. It is wrong from every angle. So.
And this is a very practical question, but the person writing it says, do you have suggestions for a resource that gives Native Indigenous names to all of the major places and sites in the U.S.? Because this person and many of us would like to use it in teaching U.S. history.
Oh, that's so great. So there's a really great young map maker. His name is Aaron Carapella, I think it is. And he does indigenous mapping of place names and indigenous people who live there. And I met him last year. I was actually at, what's it, Deerfield? Is that what it is? Is there a prep school there? Thank you. Isn't that the Koch brothers prep school? I believe it is actually, but that's where I was, is at Deerfield. And he and I were there, and he's just a wonderful young man. And so there's a lot of remapping of territories, and I actually, don't know all, but I know that in my territory I'm working on including such a map in my work for cumulative impact assessment on the proposed pipelines in our territory.
So this is not a question, but maybe you want to say a word about this. You mentioned the film Awake, and in fact, we're showing it next week here. We're showing it on Thursday from 5 to 7 in room 207. Can you close us out by just saying another word about this? It's such an important film.
Yeah. I was, really privileged. I came in a couple nights ago. For someone like me, I live in a really rural area. And so New York is kind of overwhelming, super exciting though. So the first thing I went to was this film, and Awake. And I went there, and it was, one of the greatest things about it is I sat there with a number of water protectors, that I had known. And so what it is a film that had 3 producers, including Myron Dewey and Josh Fox. And they filmed, so there's a lot of drone footage from Myron's drone that was taken 2 or 3 times and he just got another one. He's a plucky guy. And so there's drone footage, but it's a story of people from Standing Rock. And it's a story of our battle as water protectors. And it's a great film. And so I encourage you to watch it and, and support the movement of the water protectors, because they will help us all. So. Look up there, raising their hands.
Okay, so I'll take one more question and then we have to end. So, yes.
Thank you so much for
I think that's it.
I have a question
working?
about
No.
a personal sacred site for me. We talked about the big projects that the country's facing.
Just
Yeah, I think you better grab
I'm
this
trying to, but this, oh, there you go.
Good job. Thank you.
So I have a question about a personal sacred site, which isn't being compromised by a big pipeline project, but has really been playing on my heart here. So I live at Union, and I've been at Columbia for the last 4 years, and we have these beautiful magnolia trees, and they're all interconnected and sisters. And there was one magnolia tree at Barnard, which was the size of that whole organ, and she was the mother goddess. And you talk about the stress of the time of finals. I spent so much, and so has my peers, under that tree, and it just softening our soul, and has served so many women and men. And so recently Barnard decided to do a construction to make more classrooms for their students. So they moved this over 100-year-old tree. And over the last 2 years, the tree has just been dormant, standing there, and the flowers never came. And they decided to declare it dead. And so in the place of this magnificent goddess, with just the carcass, they cut it down, and they didn't have the decency to remove the branches of the tree. And I've noticed since then, the other magnolias around Barnard have not been blooming in the same way. We have 4 magnolias here in our courtyard, and I didn't know what seminary was. I was doing public policy at SEPA. I was a corporate lawyer working on construction projects, and I just ended up coming and sitting in this courtyard to get some peace, and the trees gave me so much comfort that my soul was asking, what is this place? And it led my journey to coming to seminary, which has revolutionized my whole life and the service I do in this world. I mentioned to you I work at the UN, and I really bring the spirit of what I'm learning at Union into that work. And so my fear is, with further construction, maybe these trees will die. 2 have already died, and it might have been in relation to the scaffolding we've had up. And if we keep killing these trees, we'll only have museums to go to see cherry blossoms or magnolias or posters. And these are our sacred sites in our cities, and I don't know what to do. I'm a lawyer, and I still don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So, thank you for taking my question.
So thank you for your question. So today I went and sat with your trees. And I understand that, that these are really majestic buildings. And I enjoyed my time here. I was teasing when I came in, and, the gracious staff. I mean, I really haven't sat at a desk like that and had someone help me with copying, I don't think, in my whole life. And so I really enjoyed it. I was like, wow, thank you. Yeah, in the back, they totally saved me. It was so fun. But I thought about it. It's development and communication staff, and I thought how tragic it is that you will lose the heart of your campus to a large building. And it is also the only place that I saw where the Creator is so present in the life that is there. Because I come from a religion that does not worship in a church. I come from a religious and spiritual practice that reaffirms with the Creator. And I saw that little duck out there, and I saw those trees. And I thought, that's why I was so vexed, I was vexed about it, because I felt like I would not like to see a building in the middle of the heart of your campus. It is so sad. It is like you lose your sacred place. And I am someone who has a lot of ongoing PTSD from the loss of sacred places, and it is not right to destroy them. And I understand, but I find it so ironic. I understand how money is, but I cannot understand that. I cannot understand that. And I keep wishing, I was telling them, I said, how much they spent on the missiles again? You know what I'm saying is, it's like there is money out there that should be protecting something. And I was like, you ain't going to put Trump Tower on that, are you? It's wrong. So I just want to say I'm going to pray for these trees here. And I'm going to hope that you come up with some plan, which I know that the plans are moving ahead to try to put a building here. And I understand the insanity of some of that which, exists in the real estate market in New York. But I am also someone who believes that there are very few places where life is so reaffirmed in such sacredness. And if you have them, you should try to protect them. Thank you.
So join me again in thanking Winona for her message, and remember Union, and remember North Dakota. Thank you. Thank you. And please join us for a reception in the social hall where you can continue the conversation.